Contributor Kurt Bardella. He's a Democratic strategist and columnist who's written about politics and culture. Kurt, great to see you. We, of course, always see a stepped-up effort as we approach an election. But first, let's just start. What do you think the VP is doing right?
Well, I think just getting her out there again after the State of the Union address, which I feel like was kind of the unofficial kickoff to the Biden-Harris reelection campaign. And it was a successful night, just based on, I think, the polling that we saw after it and how the American people responded to the speech in itself. And I think this is the time to be aggressive. I think for a lot of the Biden tenure so far, there's been a lot of criticism and critiquing about the vice president's role, how the administration utilized her or tried to hide her at various points in time. I think the best way to dispel that is to have her out there, have her very front and center, very visible. The one issue that we know Democrats right now are winning on is the abortion issue, is the women's rights issue, something that Republicans to this day still have not figured out the right vocabulary on. It makes sense that Kamala Harris would be the tip of the spear of that attack.
So Kurt, you talk about the fact that she's being aggressive, and there's certainly, particularly in the beginning of his tenure as president, there was criticism on the fact that, America didn't really see a lot of the vice president. We're seeing her now. Again, she is being more aggressive. Do you think this pushing of the envelope, though, could in any way hurt the Biden-Harris campaign?
I don't think so, because I think that the audience that they are trying to have her reach is her natural constituency. It's women, it's African Americans, it's anyone who feels impacted by the Dobbs decision. And I think that, again, this is where right now Democrats have an advantage because they have the first female vice president in American history to talk about that. Right now, at this moment, we don't know who's going to be on the ticket with Donald Trump. We don't know if it's going to be a woman. And so this is a tactical advantage they have between now and the convention where they can put her out there in this way in key states like Wisconsin and Georgia, looking at the swing states that they're blanketing. That's by design, and it's a tactical advantage until Republicans decide who's going to be their spokesperson to deal with these women's issues that they've been on the wrong side of right now.
All right. So speaking of putting her out there, Kurt, we know that today the former president, Trump, is going to be in Michigan, and he's really going to hit Biden hard when it comes to the border crisis, calling it the Biden border bloodbath. Is the campaign doing enough? I mean, should they be putting more emphasis on what's happening at our southern border?
Well, I think it's one of those things where if this election is about immigration and the border, Republicans will win that election. That is one of their sweet spot issues that they have been campaigning on vigorously for the better part of 2 decades now. So I think Democrats recognize, well, we can't fight them on that terrain. We'll lose. That said, you also can't let it go unaddressed. It's very clear that the border is one of the real concerning issues for the Biden administration. They're going to have to do something on immigration. They're going to have to do something with executive orders at some point to gain some ground on that, because you can't just surrender that issue because it is one of the top 3 issues in the minds of the American people.
Well, and another sticking point, the Israel Hamas War, the humanitarian crisis, certainly proving to be a sticking point for a lot of progressives, a lot of people who are already on the Democratic side. Do you think the campaign is going to change its tactics, its strategy as we move closer to November?
I don't think that it will. I don't know that it can really, because this is one of those situations where really what goes on the official side of the Biden world, the State Department, the foreign policy side, is going to be dictating what the actions are. There are obviously geopolitical connotations and consequences involved with every single action that happens and every single posture the United States takes in this conflict. And so I think the politics of it kind of take a bit of a backseat for the time being. I certainly think that the president and his team hope that by the time we get to the convention into Labor Day, that there's more stability, there's more, end in sight when it comes to the situation in the Middle East, because obviously it's hurting them with the progressive base that they're going to need to turn out in November.
My last question for you, Kurt. Obviously we know the nominees are presumed on both sides. Hasn't officially happened yet. Do you think there's any possibility of a world where Biden would not pick Harris as his running mate? Because we know a few months ago, there was a lot of speculation about that.
There's zero chance of that happening. Again, you have the first female vice president who also happens to be a woman of color. Having her not serve on the ticket would just be a no-go in Democratic politics. Like, they're not going to do that to someone who has such a historically important role, no matter what the politics might be, no matter what the polling might say. And again, the Biden people, they really feel like no matter what the polls say, they have a track record of outperforming those polls. We've seen it in the midterms. We've seen Republicans underperform. We've seen in key red states ever since Dobbs, the Dobbs decision, Democrats overperforming, Republicans underperforming. And so I think they feel very comfortable with that underdog. Like, yeah, everyone can say the polls are bad, the approval ratings are upside down, yet they still keep winning in elections.
All right. And we will certainly see what happens in November. Democratic strategist Kurt Bardella, thank you.
Thank you for having me.